Have you ever looked at the local demographic and thought, this neighborhood has a serious lack of industrial-grade lead poisoning? Well, you're in luck. Today, in Total Warhammer 3, we're going to solve this conundrum by injecting lead directly into the cranium. For this, we're playing Elspeth von Draken, a woman who has successfully combined her clinical depression with a massive budget for experimental explosives. And our goal is to teach our neighbors about industry, napalm, and the subtle art of solving political disagreements with artillery. Can we succeed in industrializing the land, or will we succumb to environmental injunctions and Romanian immigration? Elspeth stars in the Empire, which is basically Warhammer's version of the Holy Roman Empire, except instead of struggling with unity, cohesion, and severe inbreeding, they're dealing with experimental homunculi and immortal tax evaders. The game begins in the city of Nuln. It's the industrial heart of the Empire, which means it's full of child labor and ethical investments. Before we do anything, we speedrun our first hindrance by using tactics that are formally banned by the Geneva Convention. As Elspeth, we also have access to the Imperial Gunnery School, which is a fancy way of saying our government is run by the NRA. It's essentially a marketplace where we exchange schematics harvested from moral sources and confused engineers for military-grade war crimes. After investing in bigger bullets, I moved on to Wissenberg. The tactics here was simple. Use Elspeth as living bait. This worked great, probably because Elspeth secretly hopes that one of the bullets will hit her. But I quickly also discovered that the Empire had a great weakness: empathy. Unlike Skaven, my handgunners have the emotional baggage of friendship and refuse to fire directly into the backs of their own comrade. This moral failing was immediately corrected by flanking the enemy, where my men could shoot unsuspecting soldiers in the back without the burden of eye contact. Following my victory over evil, I moved on to the vampire capital of Püffendorf, where I got attacked. But thankfully, the vampires have a very big weakness: a 90-degree angle. This geometrical position allowed my great cannons to demonstrate advanced cranial separation techniques on a flying bat. After simulating a tower defense game where I had my Germans shoot at anything that doesn't resemble a man having alcohol poisoning, I won. The victory unlocked Elspeth's second mechanic, the Gardens of Morr. Now, most rulers inspire their people through prosperity, military glory, or the occasional well-timed speech. It's true. Elspeth inspires her people by installing government-mandated depression gardens across the Empire. These are not parks, they are architectural interventions designed to remind us, the local population, that death is real, inevitable, and frankly overdue for most of them. Moving on towards the goblins' unnatural occupation of Steingard, we had a quick dispute. They argued that their shields could stop bullets. They could not. After a brief and noisy debate, Steingard was successfully liberated from the burden of existence. I then arrived at Fort Sol, the only thing separating human civilization from the absolute state of nature. It was here I met my neighbors, the Wood Elves, my second biggest hindrance after the von Karsteins. Now most people see Loren as an ancient sentient forest of wonder. I see it as 8 billion board feet of untapped lumber, protected by hippies who don't believe in the internal combustion engine. Now, before we can convert Loren into an ethically sourced ammunition depot, we have to deal with the rest of Germany, especially the local Sylvanian infestation. The von Karsteins are essentially the modern depiction of a mosquito. They produce nothing, consume everything, and have a pathological obsession with tax evasion. Being at war, everything was going great until I got attacked. They ought to resolve a valiant defeat, quite the dilemma. This called for the tactful strategy of once again baiting the enemies into the distance of my handgunners, which worked most likely due to the effect of lacking brain activity in something that has been dead for several years. But then of course Vlad appeared. This was dealt with by sending the surviving members of the fort's garrison. Their job: die.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
I thought the Vlad problem was solved, but Vlad has this annoying habit of not dying. I ended my turn and he immediately attacked me again. Apparently, being run through by bullets only counts as a minor inconvenience in Sylvanian culture. Before moving towards the gold mine, and by that I mean graciously freeing the land from people who don't look like us, I made the fatal mistake of confederating Stirland. This was a trap. I thought I was acquiring prime real estate. Instead, I inherited a massive budget deficit and a schizophrenic mascot. While trying to balance my checkbook, I was introduced to my 3 new neighbors, none of which respected my property value. First, we had Draken, a radicalized houseplant suffering from advanced form of chlamydia. Second, Barundin, a furious short king holding a vital piece of the empire's real estate. And finally, Festus the Leech Lord, a sentient medical malpractice. Looking at the map, I saw that Festus had managed to spread his corruption across the empire, like a bubonic pyramid scheme. Festus the Leech Lord is, medically speaking, a lawsuit waiting to happen. The battle began promisingly. Elspeth opened the portal to the void, napalm rained from several directions, and 700 rounds of ammunition were personally delivered to a man who, by all accounts, should have taken the hint after the first 200. Then I moved my handgunners into the dogs. Now, in my defense, the dogs were in the way. In their defense, they had rabies and strong opinions about personal space. The resulting tactical reorganization, which is a generous term for what happened, introduced my front line to a giant who approached the engagement with the quiet professionalism of someone who has done this before and genuinely enjoys it. The good news is that being above average height meant we could still shoot him while he redecorated my handgunners. The bad news is that I converted what should have been a clean, decisive victory into a Pyrrhic disaster with 80% psychological casualties and a medical bill I'm choosing not to think about. Following the previous tactical disaster, I made my way towards the Brass Keep while being harassed every 6 seconds by the houseplant with attachment issues. Which brings us to Kemperbad. Festus, apparently undeterred by the concept of bullets, had snuck past my borders. Defending the city was John Helborg, 5 archers, 8 militia, and handgunners whose life insurance had very recently lapsed. In most cultures, this would be called a last stand. In none, we call this aggressive overtime. Their job was to inflict enough damage so that Elspeth could take all the glory, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to ask of people you never met and will not be compensating. While the militia were being enthusiastically converted into administrative statistics, my handgunners took on the scenic route to the flank. When Festus finally appeared, bloated with confidence and several unidentified organisms, he was greeted by the one thing no medical professional should ever face: a second opinion, delivered at high velocity. He did not survive the consultation. Just when I thought I had won, I was attacked by Gorbad Ironclaw, who decided to engage in a war against me. This was interesting because I could not actually see him on the map. Apparently, I am being invaded by a localized hallucination of several thousand angry green men. However, I used this invisible threat to gaslight Averland into a confederation, promising them protection and other blatant lies. I placed John Helborg and the local schizophrenic Marius Lightdorf in Greenstad as protectors of the south. This essentially means that every few turns an orc army will appear and they will beat it to death. On my way to Draika's home, Barundin was holding a province I needed, so I declared war, took the province, and proceeded to tell him to fuck off. This war with Draika was just like the Viet Cong, except it was nothing like the Viet Cong. The forest moves, the arrows come from directions that shouldn't exist, and every tree is personally offended by the concept of a straight line. Normally, this would concern me, but Draika brought arrows and sentient shrubbery to a steam tank fight, which is the military equivalent of throwing a tantrum at a tax audit. She is, at her core, an activist who glued herself to the road, annoying, theatrical, and ultimately problem-solved by anyone with a schedule and zero empathy. I gave her exactly as much strategic consideration as she deserves, which is to say, I drove through her and built the emotional baggage to the empire. With only a few loose ends left before I could declare peace in Germany, I went after the ogres. Like most organic life forms, ogres are highly susceptible to bullets. After clearing some land of its questionable population of obese cannibals, I achieved my short victory. But this good fortune was not over, because I saw Golg, can't say that, had the Nemesis crown, until he didn't. My imperial authority, no, our imperial authority, had reached 91, leaving only a few administrative hurdles, specifically to ruins with increasingly pungent smells, and worst of all, the French. My war with the Skaven was supposed to be a simple transaction. I take 2 provinces and leave them to their subterranean filth.
2 seconds later.
I'm in Hellpit. I decided to treat the local rat population to demonstrate my new Amethyst Ironside. These are like regular handgunners, but they've been given actual armor and a reason to live. Specifically, the legal permission to shoot the poor with magical ammunition. Now with most roadblocks and other increasingly deviating circumstances out of the way, I could focus on the true objective of the game, Vietnam. Yes, the goal has always been the industrialization of Athel Loren. I don't see a sacred forest, I see a massive inventory of raw materials protected by glue using hippies, and not realizing that this would make a great Walmart. The process began with Durfu and his friends experiencing cultural shock, specifically the shock of a 50 caliber rifle round impacting their wooden craniums at 3 times the speed of sound. Being satisfied with my most illegal deforestation, Karl Franz was a single bribery away from stepping down as the emperor. After a turn of said bribery, we had finally almost united Germany under one banner. This unification brought not only a great joy, but immediate economic collapse. I performed the unthinkable and sold the French back their own provinces to lower my overhead, bringing the deficit down to a measly 36% of my total savings. I solved the rest through the simple tactic of theft. I began beating up Wood Elf settlements and sacking their homes to fund my lifestyle. It is not a war crime if you really need the money. While Elspeth was innovating the Wood Elves, I made trade agreements with Luen. This brought my imperial authority to 100, finally uniting Germany. But the end is nigh. Yes, in 10 turns, the Wood Elves and the von Karsteins will be back to ruin German progress once more. Can I stop them, or will Germany fall to tree-hugging idealism and Romanian immigration? In the next turn I prepared. This meant burning down the Oak of Ages for fun, placing my armies in a welcoming formation in Drakenhof, taking over the rest of the Wood Elf territory, and having Durfu lose to a random town garrison. And as a final gift, I left Orion with a single province, so he could have a perfect view of his burning house. I felt peaceful. And in the next turn, the inevitable happened. The Wood Elves and the vampires respawned, now injected with copious amounts of testosterone replacement therapy. Now here is where I admit I did fuck up. When I imagined that the vampires and the Wood Elves would respawn, I did not think that every vampire and Wood Elf would respawn. But in the first fight against the Elven Menace, through the use of indiscriminate shooting and the Void, I could reenact the Vietnam War with minimal losses. I pressed on, and in the following battle against the Wood Elves, they did the unthinkable tactical decision of standing close together. This was not wise. With several armies left, my forces and me were feeling the repetition. The Eastern Front was not doing any better. Some would argue that they were doing a lot worse. But in this time, an unthinkable ally joined the fray. Alaric Getgold and his army of underprivileged appeared to face Vlad von Karstein, proving once again that bravery usually means not having a plan, and later, through bravery, attacked this random old man. In the Wood Elf provinces, due to being consistently attacked against my will, I finally cleared the tree huggers, and after burning the Oak of Ages one last time, I can finally say I did it. Looking at the map, I can confirm that Germany has been successfully industrialized. The rivers are 40% gunpowder, the life expectancy has never been lower, and every political disagreement has been resolved through the subtle art of artillery. Was it worth it? I have a dragon, a positive profit margin, and the moral clarity that comes from never once questioning my own judgment. Elspeth von Draken, industrialist, visionary, clinically depressed, and the only person in history to solve Germany's problem by personally becoming one. That's all for this one. Thanks for watching. Bye.